This started the prequel, 2013. I was commissioned by the Irving M. Klein International String Competition to write a series of solo pieces for their young hotshot string players. And just this past January 2016, the Klein people decided to do something new where they had a 30th anniversary concert, and they went to the new National Sawdust Space that had just opened in Brooklyn, New York. And I heard this young violinist playing Wieniawski, and I thought, wow, she's just incredible. Who is this person? They programmed 2 of my pieces, and she heard people playing those. She wanted to program my pieces, and I wanted to find out who she was because I thought, I want her to have some of my music.
I had already been talking with Lauren a bit about potentially doing some fun duet stuff, and Joel thought, well, hey, what if I wrote you guys a piece?
This project emerged where I would write a piece for Arias and Lauren, and that Klein decided they wanted to take a new step and commission a piece, not for a competition, but for some of their laureates. And suddenly these 2 amazing women string players started saying, well, let's do a tour. The big thing is, having written a lot of traditional recital pieces, and on one hand, and feeling a little caged in by that. On the other hand, having done theater, musical theater, a little bit of dance, incidental music, a film score, I was really hankering to do something a little bit unusual or different, just for my own sake. At some point I said, would you mind singing? And much to my surprise, they said, no, we would love to sing, do it.
And then he said, are you guys comfortable dancing? And we said, sure. And then all of a sudden we got this email thread including Paul Emerson. He has a company here in DC called Company E.
A few days before the first performance in Berkeley, we met with Paul, and we kind of sat in a dance studio at Juilliard and put it all together.
They were fish in water. They just loved the idea. And so that changed a lot of things, because it also meant that in terms of conceiving the piece, if they're going to move, I had to try to think what's playable, what could they perhaps memorize, and I didn't want to have phrasing, meters, the number of beats constantly changing and shifting, because what would that mean in terms of movement and learning the movement and the playing? So I tried to limit myself, my palette, to say what could I say in particularly the last movement that wouldn't interfere with the movement, would allow them to move, and would make it easier to create movement as well as for them, if they needed to, memorize it.
In terms of the staging, it really adds so much to the piece to be able to see the story unfold with movement.
It does begin with a little bit of a trick, that you think it's a standard recital piece. The first movement, Simple Song, is exactly that. It's simple, melodic, conversation between the violin and viola. They share material, just very, very sweet and simple. They're playing for music standing, just like any other recital. Something happens about 2/3 the way through that movement where the piece takes a little bit of a darker hue, slows down, becomes sadder, more expressive. And then there's a moment after that the first movement ends, where they look at each other and you're kind of going, what's that about? And that's where it starts to transition from straight recital into something more theatrical.
Definitely, there's a poem in the second movement in Old English, and it's about female friendships. It's a 15th century poem about female friendships.
How intricate could the string parts be while they were singing? And so I limited myself to something, a harmonic palette, and to have them do very, very soft tremolos for the most part. But they do have solo kind of virtuosic lines, and I had to be very careful to carve out space to say, okay, if you're playing this filigree idea, you're going to stop singing, but you can sing because you're just doing the tremolos. There's one moment where the sun comes out in this sad poem where they break into these big, grand, glowing arpeggios where they're just going, and we had to kind of figure out how do you get from the singing to that. And so I had to shift some things to make sure that they got to say the final syllable, close it off before playing, because there was a spot where it was just too much to play something that fast and complex while singing. Then the third movement, which is called Stomp, and they do indeed do some stomping and some moving around. And then it ends with just a lighthearted moment where I take a kind of the movement begins with a sort of intense, almost Shostakovich swing jazz moment. And at the very end, it's transmogrified in a silly, lighthearted way into like a hoedown, where it picks up tempo and they kind of sort of do a little hoedown together, circle the stage, and that's the end of the piece.
The piece, Aria with Dance Glitch, is probably one of the most interesting pieces I've ever played, I think. It incorporates not just music and playing, but also dancing and singing, and a sort of theatrical element that really lends well to the narrative, I think. And it really tells a story, and it tells the story of the relationship between two friends, which I think is really special.
I think it's an interesting moment for all three of us that they're very talented, ambitious young players who want to grab the world and do everything. And this is a nice new place for them to go to say, look, we can do all this stuff in addition to playing.
Definitely stretched my limits, and I think also everyone's limits who's been involved in a really positive way and helped us grow and understand new ways of defining music and defining art.